Hello friends, this is your friend back with a new fanfic. What if Naruto mastered the forbidden shadow spear? If you like this story, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe, and leave your thoughts in the comments. Now, let's start. 12-year-old, Shuru had woken up in his room. His eyes slowly adjusted to the bright sunshine that bombarded his face. His breathing visibly relaxed after he had woken up from his everyday nightmare. 5 years ago, the kid now named Shuru was living a happy life with his parents in Shinto County until a heavy fire bombarded the area, pretty much decimating the region. His life turned upside down in mere seconds as his parents were killed as well as hundreds and hundreds of people who lived nearby the blast radius. However, because of what happened, the boy suffered a severe case of amnesia. He did not remember the events prior to the fire. The only memory he had was of the fire and the events that followed. He remembered the haunting screams begging him for help. He remembered how the extreme heat burned his shoes to the point that he could barely feel it anymore. He remembered the images of the burned bodies around him as he ran for his dear life. In essence, his first memory of hell on earth. However, above all, he remembered seeing the face of a man in elation upon saving his life. Emiya Kuritsugu soon took him to the hospital right after taking him from the fire and offered to adopt the kid. His mind was blank at the moment, but Shuru had accepted it, nonetheless. Emiya Kuritsugu had disclosed before that he was a magus and Shuru found it so cool that he wished to know more about it. 6 years later, Emiya Shuru had gathered a new set of fond memories to have with his adopted father and even his sister figure Fujimura Taiga, a girl older than him who lived next door. Ever since learning from his father that he was a magus, Shuru had pestered his father to train him as well. After many pestering, his father had agreed to teach the boy something, though it became clear that the boy would never amount to much in the magecraft department. Kuritsugu was silently thrilled, because this way his son would not be dragged into such a dangerous way of living. The boy, though, displayed nothing but tenacity in his upbringing. He constantly trained his body and even practiced kendo to compensate for his subpar achievement in magecraft. Kuritsugu found out that the only ability that Shuru had possible for him was reinforcement, and it was not even very prominent. Aside from training in magecraft and constantly honing his body, Emiya Shuru had developed other type of skills. In no time, the boy became the house's keeper, taking care of every domestic work possible. He was the cook, he did the dry cleaning, he cleaned the house, pretty much everything house chore related. Getting up from his bedroom, Shuru got dressed and got ready for the day. As soon as stepped outside his bedroom, he saw bloodstains on the ground. The image would have scared him, had he not seen it before. A look of sadness appeared as he remembered that his father now had possibly 6 months left to live. Shuru had bombarded his old man with questions about what happened, but Kuritsugu would simply resume to a dire illness he had inherited from his own father. Eventually, Shuru had accepted the cold hard truth and mentally prepared for the inevitability. As such, he had tried his best to keep the house in pristine condition so that his father did not have to move a finger. He would work extra effort in the kitchen learning as much as possible so that his father enjoyed his last meals. Even so, Shuru could not understand why his father constantly traveled, despite his illness. He had left yesterday for his constant trips to Germany and England, leaving Shuru to take care of the house all on his own. Taiga would appear every now and then, but mostly the boy would be alone. However, doing things on his own was nothing new. He would cook, shop for groceries, go to school, do his normal training routine, until the day when his father returned from his trip. Today was Sunday and Shuru had a list of chores to perform today. Taiga had barged in demanding breakfast and Shuru obliged her with a smile on his face. His height nowadays was enough that he did not need a stool to reach the kitchen. After that, the young went outside to take care of things as soon as possible. Shuru usually chose weekends to quickly finish the chores he needed, since he would not be able to in school days. He had taken some of his father's overcoats to a specialist dry cleaner to get rid of the blood stains. When asked about it, Shuru did tell the kind worker the truth. It was no secret after all. Shuru left the place before seeing the look of pity in the man. The boy really did not need that right now. After that, he went for some grocery shopping for the week and then he had to take his small bike for repairs. When he finished his usual chores for the day and seeing the sun about to set for the day, young Shuru looked at his list and saw that he still had one more thing to do before going back home. He had been doing this every Sunday after he found out about his father's illness. Taiga had taught him about religion and had personally taken him one day to visit the Ryudo temple and taught him about the many rituals of Buddhism. He found the bus that would take him there and quickly hopped inside. Ryudo temple . Despite being rather late evening, Shuru was not surprised to find that the place was packed with people as he climbed the huge stairs towards the temple. Sunday was a special day of the week in Buddhism. Many people would come here, some would pray and search for atonement, others would just come to appreciate what they have or even seek enlightenment for the future. Still, many families would come here and make a field day in celebration. Thus, he could see children playing and even teenagers hanging out together. Shuru smiled and walked towards the shrine as he kneeled and prayed for his father. Shuru's experiences taught him to become a realist in terms of expectancies. Therefore, the man-child did not pray for a miracle to happen. His father had already explained that what the doctors told Kuritsugu. His organs were failing slowly but surely, and his inner strength was at best a third of a healthy individual. The kid had made peace with the fact that he would lose his adopted father. Therefore, he did not pray for salvation or miracles, but rather that, if possible, that his father would not suffer in pain and just rest in peace. After saying his praise, Shuru clapped his hand as per the ritual and looked up to the statue of Buddha with a solemn smile on his face. Ah, if it isn't young Shuru. The boy turned to his right and saw his father's friend Reiken Ryudo walking towards him, carrying a gentle smile. Every Sunday, I see you come here. If I may ask, who or what do you pray for? Reiken-san, is for my father. The man tried to keep up the composure, but Shuru could see the man faltering his usual control. Many did not notice but Shuru did. He could see when people would look at him in sympathy. It happened quite frequently in his life from those who knew his story and of Kuritsugu. And he could not act out on it, but it bothered him greatly. Reiken for his chance wondered about religion and how much this little child had suffered. He was no stranger to this little one's history as one of the victims of the Fuyuki fire and took away the boy's previous family, leaving him all alone until Kuritsugu found him amongst the rubbles. Now, 5 years later, the boy would once again lose his family because of Kuritsugu's terminating illness. I see. Well, carry on then. If you want someone to talk to, I will be here. The boy smiled, at least thankful that the man gave him his space. Reiken-san, is Issei around? I wanted to say hi. Another reason Shuru had chosen to come to the temple was to meet his best friend in school. His father had introduced them one day and they hit it off. Issei was also quite reserved for their age and Shuru got along quite well with him. Reiken smiled at the friendship. The father frowned at seeing his son emulating Reiken's every behavior. The priest was aware that eventually Issei would inherit his position, but he at least hoped for the kid to enjoy his youth and find some friends to play with. Now seeing young Shuru about to be alone once more, he figured that having a friend would help him surpass the troubled times ahead. Problem, though, was that. Sorry Shuru, today is a busy day for him. Reiken's heart broke slightly at seeing the dejected face for a second, followed by a sincere smile and a nod in appreciation. This boy was just too much. Yeah, I figured. Well, please tell me I said hi and that I will see him tomorrow at school. The boy then bowed in respect to the head priest and walked away. Despite this being a sad event, Shuru became mesmerized by the sight of the sunset dimly illuminating the halls of the temple. The boy spent some time just enjoying the scenery before reaching towards the stairs once more to catch the bus back home. As he descended the stairs, he could see a family a few steps down. A father who was holding a little girl on his shoulders, a mother who was carrying some bags and a little boy by the mother's side who was bouncing a football ball on each and every step of the stairs. Shuru found himself smiling at the memory of doing that exact same thing the first time he came to the temple with his father. As soon as the family and Shuru stepped on the same step, the kid had missed his bounce and the ball diverted towards the forest around the temple. The kid began to cry to his mother and father, earning a fond smile from Shuru. Don't worry, I will get that for you. With that, Shuru ran towards the direction of the bouncing ball, not even waiting for the family to appreciate his gesture. He could see the ball rolling down the forest fast and realized that he would have to step it up from fear of not reaching out in time and lose sight of the ball. Shuru admitted to never wandering around the forest around the temple. And because the sun was already down for the day, the sky was slowly turning dark and the forest around him became more daunting as he progressed on his path. The noise of the ball still bouncing reached his ear and the boy followed the noise until he had reached a clearing of sorts. He could see that the ball continued to bounce until it got inside what appeared to be a dark cave. This time, the feeling of dread became more intimidating as he stopped in front of the dark cave's entrance. The wind by now picked up both from the forest and from within the cave. His conscience was screaming for him to head back and apologize to the family for not finding the ball. However, Shuru had given his word that he would help find it. Thus, strengthening his resolve, the boy went inside, hoping that the now moonlight would be enough for him to see inside the cave. As he stepped inside, however, he began to feel unease as if his inner strength was slowly leaving his body. By each step he took, he could feel a different wind reaching his face. He could now hear whispers and even rattling of chains being dragged all around him. Despite that, he kept walking. For some reason, he found that his body was doing the walking for him. His eyes became unfocused and his senses started playing tricks on him. He could not formulate a coherent thought as to why this was happening to him. He could not recall why he was here, he could not recall how he got here, he just walked. Back at the entrance of the cave, one with enough knowledge could see a white fissure in the air indicating a portal. Shuru did not know how much time passed, seconds, minutes, hours. All he could see was darkness. When the first images appeared in his eyes, the boy's throat closed as he was in a clearing. Where he stood there was no light, there was no sound, just emptiness. His eyes could see hills around him and even a dark-looking castle in the horizon. Though, he figured that his mind was playing tricks on him. His steps continued, but now Shuru found himself losing strength, he found himself with the lack of air, his eyes were slowly shutting down as his body became simply too heavy to keep standing up. He fell on the ground unconscious, none the wiser that he was not alone. Spirits and wraths circulated around him, all of them quite salivating at the prospect of the boy's life dry. It has been ages since the living had set foot in this place. Before any of the spirit could even touch the boy, however, all of them were impaled by a red lance in less than a second. By the length of the hair and body curves, it appeared to be a woman as she kneeled to check on the last arrival to her land. She would not waste time pondering on exactly how this boy appeared here of all places. She could feel that the boy's life force was slowly draining him, and he would be dead within minutes. She quickly placed his prone body above her shoulders and used all her agility to take him to the safe confines of her castle. _= castle ===. When Shuru next opened his eyes, he was surprised to find that he was sleeping on what appeared to be a couch in front of a fireplace. His memory was still foggy as he tried to remember just how he was in this place. Just by looking around, he could see a more classic decoration, no doubt believing that the design was far from the usual places he had known in his hometown. His memory was returning to him and he recalled chasing a ball inside that dark cave near the Ryudo temple, but how the hell did he get here, wherever here was? I see you have awakened, boy. Shuru almost jumped from where he was sitting as he turned to see the woman whose gentle but firm tone reached his ears. The fire had allowed him to take a look at the woman standing there with her arms crossed below her cleavage. Shuru found himself mesmerized at such a beauty. Long purple hair reaching her waist, he felt her red eyes looking at him as if she was looking inside of him. She wore a full-body outfit that had metallic shoulder pads. Strapped on her back, Shuru could see what appeared to be a red-looking spear. Also, Shuru could not help but shiver slightly at the leveled gaze she was showing him. Who are you and where am I? The woman kept staring at the kid for a good while as if she was judging his every action. The name is Scathach, boy, and right now, you're in a place that may very well be where you die. Shuru held his breath as this woman uncrossed her arms and approached him, before placing a hand on his forehead. Your life force is slowly returning to you, that's good. What's your name, boy? Hyaru, Emiya Shuru. Humph, based on your hair color, I would hail you as a Scot, but the name is strange. Where are you from, Emiya Shuru? Fuyuki, Japan, Miss Scathach. The woman found it humorous that the boy would address her as such, though the location he hailed from was strange. The gateways to this place were mostly located within Ireland, Scotland and the United Kingdom. Certainly no gate would open that far away. Scathach has lost count of how old she was right now, and after every soul that has passed through this land, she became familiarized with every possible place on planet Earth. The place called Fuyuki must have a powerful ley line if it managed to open a gateway to the land of shadows. She would have to investigate this matter further. She found that the kids, also red eyes just like hers, were looking at her with curiosity, probably waiting her to explain things further. "Stay here until I return, I will have to check a few things." The boy appeared to be cautious, but she could not feel fear from him. "If you step foot outside the castle, you will die. In here no harm will come to you." "Sure, if you say so." Scathach continued to look at the boy in curiosity, but soon left to investigate. In the end, Shuru waited for half an hour and was almost closing his eyes once more at the warmth of the fire when he heard high heels echoing around the hallway. True to Shuru's report, Scathach did find the portal that led to this city called Fuyuki, and like she suspected, it did have a powerful ley line. The black cave had a very strong energy inside, albeit very dark and ominous one. The moment she arrived at the portal, though, she was surprised to see the energy subsiding as if losing strength. As such, it became impossible to cross to the other side. Now, she could not take the boy back to where he came from, which meant that she now had an unfortunate house guest. This place was her responsibility, and no living person, well, no regular living person should roam these lands. When she explained the boy what happened, Scathach was curious at the lack of a proper response from this kid. Well, he looked attentive to her explanation all right, but she was prepared for a different reaction. Fear, anxiety, afraid of being far away from home, away from his family. Instead, all he responded at the end of her explanation was, "I understand." Truly, Shuru was thinking about his house and school. No doubt, Taiga will soon receive a phone call from the school saying that he went missing. His father rarely took a phone with him on his trips, so Shuru doubted that he would hear about what happened to him. And he usually left for months before returning, so by then, Shuru was counting on being able to come home. Plus, for all intents and purposes, this woman before him did not appear to be evil, nor would treat him badly. Anyway, like I said before, do not leave this castle and you should be fine. I can show you where you can sleep, shower, and the kitchen in case you're hungry. She led him throughout the castle, giving him a quick tour. Throughout the tour, the woman could see his calm look, and not once did he pester her for anything, which was a blessing. Scathach did not believe she would be able to handle some kid whining at her for God knows how many months until the portal reopened. The last place they visited was the kitchen, and Shuru was simply mesmerized by the gigantic place. The furniture appeared old compared to his house, but he could work his way around quite easily. Scathach found it weird that the kid would smile at the sight of the kitchen. "Thank you for your hospitality, Miss Scathach. If you wish, I could prepare something for you in retribution." She blinked twice at the offer and smirked. "Sure kid, help yourself, it's not like I have anything more to do today." With that, the boy walked inside and quickly went inside the storage room nearby to collect some items, while Scathach would simply serve herself a glass of whiskey and take a seat by the table. Feeling the hard liquor clearing her throat, Scathach pondered on the last individual who came to these halls, though it's been a long, long time ago. While the Dog of Ireland was fun to be around, he had left far too soon and had not finished his training with her. The bastard ended up dying soon afterward. Though she came to understand his prowess in battle and could not help but feel pride of his achievements as his teacher. And looking at the kid going his way around the kitchen with astounding ease, she found herself hoping to have a good interaction at the very least with another living soul. It was far better than constantly facing demons, wraths, and gods in this forsaken place of hers. So, she fired some questions his way, things about his life, his relatives, his likes, dislikes. Shuru explained to her everything about his life, or at least the stuff he remembered anyway. Beginning from the event that shaped him into the person he was now to being adopted by his father, and then his life together with the man. He talked to her about school and his usual life with his sister figure and friends. Shuru found himself quite strange as he was at ease around this woman. Kuritsugu had always told him to be wary of strangers, but considering what happened to him right now, his life was of little consequence to a woman like her. The boy then asked some questions about this place and these wraths that almost killed him. Scathach was slightly taken aback by the apathy in which the boy talked about the possibility of losing his life. As if he had no qualms about dying. "Ah, Miss Scathach, can you tell me how to turn the flame on with this stove? I can't seem to find a switch." She snorted and snapped her fingers, before a flame erupted right below the pan where Shuru laid some eggs and bacon. Scathach's nose flared at the smell of a home-cooked late breakfast. The noise of bacon and eggs being fried was like music to her untrained ears. She usually did not find the need to cook a meal. Living alone for so long had forced her to go about food in a pragmatic sense, just enough to satisfy her hunger. "Wow, that's so cool, miss. Are you a magus as well?" The Lancer looked at the kid in a new light, frowning her eyebrows. While it was not an overly protected secret that she used magic, she felt somewhat averse to mingling with the kind as she had never met one trustworthy and honorable. However, this was a mere kid she was talking about. Looking at him more closely, though, she could barely find the traces of a magus. Though the magic circuits were present, it was almost imperceptible, faint. "When you say, as well, are you referring to you, Shuru? Though I can't say I'm overly impressed. Yeah, father also did say that I would not be any good at it. The only passable skill I can make is reinforcement and I'm not very good at it." Scathach snorted at the pep talk. "I wanted to prove him wrong, you know, but it's been a while I started training in it and nothing, plus it hurts like hell every time I need to create a new magic circuit." This time Scathach blinked rapidly at the absurdity of the statement just as Shuru finished cooking and placed 2 dishes of eggs and bacon on the table. The absurdity of making magic circuits left forgotten as she looked at her plate and let her untrained senses fill her in. The wonderful smile and the smoothing noise of freshly cooked bacon assaulted her senses. She was not even that hungry, though she found herself slightly drooling at the prospect. Shuru saw this and smiled as he took his own knife and fork to eat his own plate. Kuritsugu had traveled throughout the world, hence he had decided to import some culture to his son. As such, Shuru learned how to make both Japanese and European-style dishes. When Scathach ate, she felt her rusty palate sending her all kinds of different information that her brain went into overload. She started eating slowly and savoring each piece like it was her last. Right now, she was looking forward to the kid staying with her for a while as he would be able to cook all sort of different and tasty food for her. "I'm glad you liked it, Miss Scathach. Well, it seems that having you here, boy, will prove beneficial after all. Now, please go back to that, creating your magic circuits again." Shuru finished his plate and looked at her strangely. "Ah, father never explained it in detail, so I kind of taught myself how to use magic by converting my nerves into magic." Shuru was about to explain what he did, when he saw the look of incredulity. She now wondered how the hell the boy is still alive. "Some father you got there. It would be better if he never taught you, it would have been more merciful." To his look of doubt, she elaborated. "Boy, activating your magic circuits is considered the very first lesson. You need to know how to, before even attempting actual magic. I'm guessing your father did this on purpose to lure you away from using it." She could tell the look of betrayal quite easily and it made her sigh. Shuru had told her many things about his adopted father and she really did not want to burst his bubble like that. "So, you mean, I have been doing it all wrong from the start," she nodded, while finishing her glass of whiskey and pouring some more. "Afraid so. I will tell you what, magus tend to operate through equivalent exchange. So, if you make me a delicious meal like this one every day, I will teach you how to properly activate and use your magic circuits and even see a few things more I can teach you throughout your stay here." She found humorous how happy the boy was at the prospect. He would be properly trained and all he had to do was cook for her. It sounded too good to be true. However, Shuru then saw a maniac smile on her face appearing and she now was sending him mixed messages. "You will find that my method of training probably will be much different than your father's. I can promise you it will be painful, yes, painful indeed." Shuru found himself swallowing hard at that and the sense of dread did not stop even after the woman smiled at him and extended the plate to him wanting another round of his delicious bacon and eggs. Shuru's first night in the land of shadows was quite weird. First of all, the concept of time was warped. There was no daytime or nighttime as it was always dark outside. Scathach had explained that it would take some time to get used to it, though Shuru learned that the woman rarely indulged much in the usual concepts like hunger or tiredness. For instance, in her life, there was no breakfast, lunch or dinner, there was no bedtime. When she was hungry, she would eat something. When she was tired, she would sleep. It could be quite bothersome to keep track of time, living like this. Right after Shuru finished his snack, he returned to the couch by the fireplace where he slept. When he opened his eyes, a part of him believed it was the next day, though looking at the window, it was still dark outside. Closing his eyes once more, he returned to sleep only to realize that it would be always dark outside. Complaining, he left the coach and followed the castle lights towards the kitchen, until he found the owner of the castle already there waiting for him. She was wearing the same clothes from yesterday and Shuru wondered if laundry was also not a concern of hers in this land. Morning brat, Scathach looked at the kid who was scratching his eyes, looking quite lost. Ah, is it morning? I can't really tell. He moved around the kitchen, before turning to his teacher. Is there something you wish me to make? I have a feeling I will enjoy whatever it is you're planning. Shuru, the fire is already on. Shuru nodded as he gathered the ingredients for a ham omelette today. Going through the motions, Shuru yawned as he cracked a few eggs, sliced the ram nice and neat, before placing everything inside the pan. Scathach was watching the entire procedure with humor as the kid could very well be blindfolded and still go through the same routine. She followed his hand movements and found enough dexterity to rival an servant. Also, the smell soon reached her nostrils and made her mouth salivate in anticipation. Scathach began to believe that she will suffer once the kid returned to his home. Who would cook for her like this when he was gone? Shuru then neatly placed one of the omelets on top of a plate as he made another one. He had also heated up some milk to go along with the nice dish. Within minutes, the table was fixed and they both enjoyed the nice meal. Scathach clearly more than Shuru did if the speed in which she devoured her omelet was anything to go by. Seriously kid, if I did not know any better, I would say you were spoiling me with your food. By this time, Shuru was drinking his glass of milk and smiled in appreciation for the compliment. It's the least I could do since you saved my life and is willing to help me with my training. Scathach finished her own glass of milk and got up from the table. Well, I have to run a couple errands right now, but I will be back shortly so that we can start. Shuru nodded, already taking the plates from the table, and washing them, once more earning a chuckle from her. As the kid watched her leave, Shuru had processed his training so far, or lack thereof. He remembered the conversation they had yesterday and frowned at the notion of his father not bothering to train him properly or even purposely teach him the wrong way. Shuru knew how much the man was against him learning magecraft, but he believed his old man would at least bother to teach him something basic like how to use his magic circuits. If what Scathach said yesterday was true, then Shuru could very well get himself killed by doing what he did. While he did not believe his father wanted this to happen, he certainly could have showed a bit more initiative. After all, using magic circuits was not supposed to be painful, but the man knew this and said nothing. He allowed Shuru to use it incorrectly, but for what reason? Realizing that he cleaned the dishes probably twice already, Shuru sighed and went back to the living room. The boy absolutely and unequivocally loved his adopted father, but in this manner, the look of disappointment was evident. Miss Scathach believed that his father's intentions were to make it as hard as possible so that he would eventually stop trying and give up. And that made very little sense, considering one talk he had with his father once about becoming a hero of justice. Shuru always intended to learn magecraft so that he could be one in the future. And now he learned that his training was tempered by the very same man who had accepted that his son will follow in his footsteps and help others with the use of magecraft. The boy had reached the conclusion that in terms of magecraft, he was indeed on his own. And right now, he had maybe someone willing to at least give him the basics, even if for a limited period of time. Shuru decided that he would embrace this opportunity with every fiber on his body. He would absorb Miss Scathach's generosity. Hopefully, he could learn even more and perhaps improve upon back home. He heard high heels echoing throughout the castle and smiled in eagerness. However, his nose soon flared at the familiar stench he remembered quite clearly. His senses did not fail him as Miss Scathach walked inside the room dripping with blood all over her outfit. though it appeared that she had no wound and the blood was not her own. Still, it was evident in her expression how elated she was right now, despite being covered in blood. Shuru could also see blood dripping from the red spear that she carried on her back. Scathach was indeed ecstatic as she had just fended off against a powerful opponent that made her work to get rid of. Her body craved for opportunities like this, after all. "Ah, Miss Scathach, are you okay?" She was so self-absorbed in remembering the fight that she had yet to acknowledge that the boy was there staring at her in concern. "I'm more than okay, Shuru." Taking her red lance by her hands, Shuru became mesmerized at the dance of movements before she finished with a thrust upward. "Fighting powerful opponents is what makes me feel alive and I love it." The boy, however, was looking at her movements and could not help but admire her skills. Also, his eyes were drawn to her spear. His eyes went through every little detail. To the pointed blade filled by foreign blood to the handle that had the same bright red color as the blood that now dripped from the spear. Scathach looked at the boy who became transfixed at her, to the point that she smiled lecherously. "Aren't you a little too young to be looking at me like that, boy?" Shuru blinked for a while, before blushing even redder than the very blood that dripped from the spear. No, was not." Scathach laughed out loud upon seeing the kid waving his hands in front of him. "Relax, I'm not mad. Now come, we shall begin your training." He frowned and followed the woman who turned and showed her back to him. "I was looking at the spear." The woman looked at him briefly as they walked. "For some reason, I could not take my eyes away from it." She hummed in thought as they walked. Guy Bolg alternative was her noble phantasm and it was considered a cursed spear. If Shuru was looking at her weapon with that much attention, then something could be understood from the kid's potential ability. Powerful weapons from history like hers were sentient. The weapon thus could only be wielded by those powerful enough. It has been in her possession for a long time now. Its sister spear Guy Bolg was given to her last student Siyu Chilane. Something to ponder for latter, she reasoned as they got inside a dark room, well, darker than most. Shuru saw the room to be similar in design to the rest and in the middle of the room, an energy circle of sorts glowed in bright white color. "Now, Shuru, before we begin, I will need you to lie down inside the circle." The boy inspected it and frowned. He could see stones forming the circle and each of the stone had runes inscribed in it. The circle was spinning in a low velocity. Scathach at least reasoned that the kid had some brains as he inspected it with caution. It would do well in his future to not simply take her or anyone's words for granted. "Before I teach you about magic circuits, it's important for me to understand your element and origin." Shuru looked at the woman with a huge question mark engraved on his forehead. That look makes Scathach roll her eyes and sigh in dismay. A part of her wondered if she had chosen wisely to bother with the kid. Obviously, his father did not. "Sorry Miss Scathach, but could you explain what element and origin means?" Short kid, a magus normally has the capacity to manipulate at least one of the elements known in nature: wind, earth, fire, water, void, amongst others less known. It is the basis of the magus's ability to use spells in regard to a specific element. Now, the most important is the origin, as it's the starting point that defines one's existence and directs one's actions throughout life. It is the driving force that comes from within the root that has managed to stream out of the source and take on material form. In essence, finding out about your element and origin will allow me to better understand what I could possibly teach you. Understood? Shuru nodded in satisfaction at the explanation as his eyes brightened in eagerness at the prospect of using some cool fire-based move or something. Scathach just smirked back at the clear enthusiasm. She could at least humor him since she was curious herself. "Now, go inside and stop wasting time, kid. And don't forget to take off your shirt." As he stepped inside and did like she instructed, the summoning circle hummed to life as the boy lied down. Scathach then also stepped inside. She drew a small dagger, earning a shudder from the kid, though her face did not show any intent of killing him. She quickly drew blood from his arm. Scathach frowned as the wound showed clear signs of closing faster than it was possible, though her intent was to use his own blood for the drawing on the kid's chest and stomach. By each drawing, the summoning circle's bright light intensified. It took a couple of minutes for her to draw the runes on his body, so that the circle could tell her the boy's element and origin. However, Scathach soon frowned as her runes was not giving her a clear answer to this boy's element and not even his origin. She closed her eyes and rubbed her hand on his chest as she used her own energy to have a better understanding. The summoning circle started speaking to her, showing him only one image. The image would dictate the boy's element and origin. However, all she could see was a sword. Elegant in design, composed by blue handle and golden scabbard. She opened her eyes and closed once more, but the image remained, now clearer than ever, as if this weapon was there in the same room as them. The sharpness of the image told her just how strong the origin and element is, which was quite astounding. The end result of her findings was that this boy's case was a rarity even for her who has met a great many magus and warriors in her life. Shuru opened his eyes and saw the woman on top of him. She was rubbing both hands on his chest and stomach, and he was beginning to feel uncomfortable at the soft, although calloused, touch. "Ah, Miss Scathach, is there anything wrong?" When she opened her eyes, Shuru noticed the pensive look and tensed somewhat. "Sword. I'm sorry." Scathach looked at the boy and explained. "Both your element and your origin are one and the same, sword. This represents both good and bad news. As I am in favor of the bad news first, I will start with that." The boy nodded, already fearing that perhaps his father was right about him not being good enough. "The bad news is that it will be almost impossible for you to perform elemental magic as well as many other types of magic out there. I will go as far as to guess that with the exception of projection and reinforcement, most magic will be inaccessible to you." Shuru by now considered that the floor was yanked from beneath him at that. So, his father was right in the end. He would never amount to much in the end. Scathach saw the disappointed look and snorted. "I did say there was good news, didn't I? Why bother? You already said that I would not be able to do most of the spells." "Well, the good news is that even if limited to projection and reinforcement, these two spells can be used far better than anyone else. With that, I at least know what to teach you, kid. And do not look so down. The value of a warrior is not limited to the number of skills one possesses, but rather how developed the skill is. Tell me who would win a fight, a warrior who used multiple weapons or another who trained his entire life in only one weapon?" The question would be more directed to a more experienced individual, but she was trying to make a point, both for his and her sanity here. The boy has the capacity to be more of a fighter than a regular magus, but if she were to choose, she would choose a fighter any day, and that motivated her even more than if the boy had an actual element to work with. Plus, that innate healing ability from earlier was curious. Shuru, for his turn, found the answer to be rather simple, but that only because he knew about the history of his ancestors. A samurai would train his entire life to hone his sword skills to the maximum. "I guess that the specialist would." She nodded, "At least the kid has brains." "Precisely, the specialist will have full knowledge of his style of fighting and know how best to defend, while the other would have only a passing knowledge on each of the weapons. After all, no one can ever be a specialist in more than one ability. You always tend to develop one more than the other. Now, with that taken care of, I guess it's time for us to have a feel at your magic circuits, see what's going on with them." Once more, Shuru felt the touch of her hands, but now she would only use one hand and press his chest firmly with her eyes closed. "Huh, I can see the reason now, all your magic circuits are dormant. It makes sense now that you would try to overuse them and easily lose control. Great, so I can start learning magic now, huh?" Scathach though nodded negatively. "Unfortunately, no, because the circuits are dormant. I will have to awake them, and that will hurt. Once I awake them, you will feel numb for a while as the circuits will take time to adapt. Probably in about 2 days, we can begin. I also have other skills I can teach you, though that will also have to wait. Now, hold still, this will hurt a lot." Shuru tensed as the woman proceeded to force her own energy inside his body, going through each one of his magic circuits and jump-start them literally by force. Each time, he trembled in pain, feeling as if he was pierced by a knife. And he had 27 magic circuits. He flinched as one by one, the circuits were being forcefully opened. When the woman was almost done, Shuru was trying his best to overcome the pain, but he was failing miserably. It was indeed excruciating. "Last one, kid, brace yourself as this one will hurt the most." She stopped her hand close to Shuru's heart region and forced her own energy inside. This time, the boy could not hold his own and screamed in excruciating pain. Inside his body, the usually dead black lines combusted with electricity. Scathach flipped his body and searched for more circuits to open, until she was satisfied that all of them were working flawlessly. However, by now, the kid had passed out from the pain. Still, he faced the pain quite admirably, and that earned her respect somewhat. Lifting him up, she carried him bridal style and laid him on the couch next to the fireplace, as he would no doubt sleep for quite some time. == 2 days later == It took 2 days for Shuru's body to properly respond so that his teacher could begin to teach him how to properly activate his magic circuits. When Shuru woke up yesterday, he could barely walk. Each step he took felt like he was running a marathon. As such, the boy succumbed to sleeping through the entire day, not even bothering to eat. Now, he stood in front of his teacher, looking at her as if she had grown a second head. The reason being that the explanation the woman had just provided. Activate one's magic circuits operated throughout what she mentioned as a mental trigger. However, the kick was that each magus a different one, so there was really no theory to work on. Why are you staring at me for, kid? Did I stutter? I don't know how to find my own mental trigger, how do I do that? Scathach sighed and rubbed her forehead a bit. This was the first time that she was teaching a completely green magus, so it was expected that she would have to explain everything. There isn't much to explain here, Shuru, you just have to close your eyes and look deep within yourself. Once your mind is cleared, normally, it's the first sound that comes to mind. Shuru frowned at the presumably lack of a clear course of action here, but complied, nonetheless. Closing his eyes, first he tried his best to relax his breathing and get rid of all possible thoughts. He imagined himself inside the cave next to Ryudo Temple. As he crossed the entrance, he could not see anything, just blackness. With that, it did not matter if he had his senses. There was no image, there was no sound, no sense of smell. As he controlled his breathing, the boy had reached a state of mentality that could equal to meditation. Then Shuru began to think about his magic circuits and what came to mind. Suddenly, he could see an image he had never seen before, at least not in this shape and color. Living in a Japanese house for so long, he knew what a scabbard looked like. But this one was completely different and quite beautiful. It was made of gold and decorated with blue enamel that seemed more like a treasure to show dignity and nobility than an actual weapon. Shuru could also see a blue handle, meaning there was a sword inside. His mind then conjured the image of the sword being released from the sheath. The smooth noise of metal sliding out of the scabbard echoed inside his mind, and Shuru jolted in surprise as he felt his magic circuits flare to life instantly afterward. When he opened his eyes, the boy was surprised to see yellow energy pouring outside his body. Scathach was taken aback the moment it happened. She already believed that Shuru's circuits, though average in quantity, more than compensated in terms of quality. However, the image before her was mind-boggling. The energy was so potent that exuded from his body. So much promise in front of her eyes that Scathach began to feel something that she had only ever felt upon training Siyu Chilane. Like she stated before, Shuru would be considered a one-tricky pony, a spellcaster rather an actual magus. However, the boy could very well train his only ability to a point where he could be almost invincible in a fight. Scathach smirked as her warlust was beginning to show. He was barely out of his diapers and already showed this much prowess. She could only shudder in delight at the prospect of her ward as an adult fully trained warrior. All right, Shuru, that's enough. The boy looked at his teacher and stopped the flow. Excellent, now, we can truly begin. I trust you already know how to use projection and reinforcement, so let us give it a shot here. Scathach began to think of what the boy could project, before she remembered that the kid was fancying her lance the other day. Try projecting my spear, let's see how you do with your magic circuits now fully operational. Shuru nodded as he closed his eyes in deep concentration. The image of his teacher's lance appeared in his mind as he remembered each and every detail of the accursed weapon. Once he finished picturing it, Shuru then used his mental trigger and activated his circuits. Scathach's eyes could see the boy's hands holding a beam of energy and waited with a surprised lack of patience for someone who had outlived many. When the boy opened his eyes, he saw the product of his work and smiled in elation at the feeling. He no longer felt pain, and he now could see that his efforts proved successful. It was frustrating to see that his efforts meant nothing in the past, but now, he could progress in his ultimate goal. In his hand, was a perfect replica of Scathach's Guy Bulb alternative. The woman gasped at the image as she grabbed the projected lance, much to the boy's complaint. Scathach took hold of the weapon and visualized the spear intently. The balance was there, that much she could feel just by holding it. She could feel the weapon, albeit not as she could with her own. Exercising strength that Shuru did not know she possessed, the woman placed her hands on the spear's extremities and slammed the middle on her knee. Shuru was surprised at the action until he saw the spear break in 2 pieces, before vanishing from their eyes. A fine first attempt, but you'll realize it is tough to impress me, Shuru. This lance could serve as a sparring weapon, but certainly it can't match my own. Shuru frowned but nodded. He had fire in his eyes now and the woman could see the resolve. She knew what the kid lacked. No magus would ever be able to do what this kid could do. But projection was only the first step. Listen carefully, Shuru, it's not enough to simply visualize the weapon in your mind. From the outside, it may look the same, but the most important is the inside. The weapon's composition material, the forged steel, the balance, you need to consider this entire process in your mind. Thus, once you project the weapon, it's now time to reinforce it. Do it one more time as I will guide you through it. She crossed her arms, fully integrated into teacher mode. As she saw her lance being projected once more, she started it. Excellent, now judge the concept of creation. Focus on the weapon's basic structure. Shuru with his eyes still closed began to enchant reinforcement on his projected weapon. Now, duplicate the composition material in your mind. She could see the weapon glowing in reddish hue. This is an accursed spear, Shuru, and it's quite ancient. Think about reproducing the accumulated years. The boy's forehead began to sweat in concentration, while trying his best to grasp his teacher's words. He concentrated on the weapon in his hands as well as the feeling he had once he looked at the spear for the first time. His mind was processing through it all, with his magic circuits activated. Scathach by this time was giddy with excitement. She could feel the projected Guy Bulb resonating to her. Shuru kneeled on the ground holding his head in pain as his projected lance fell on the ground. He was panting at the exertion of his magic circuits. Scathach smiled as she kneeled next to the kid and grabbed the new spear. Like she expected, it was perfect. She twirled the lance and performed her moves. She thrusted the spear at imagining opponents and used the back end of the lance to smash other opponents. Shuru watched from the corner of his eyes his teacher's dance. Every move the woman made was carried with grace and power that made Shuru in awe at the skill. Shuru was surprised when the woman focused her own mana throughout the spear. He watched as the spear glowed in bright blood red. When the energy stopped, Shuru saw something that he swore would scare him for life. His teacher started to laugh. She was laughing uncontrollably and holding her stomach. Her eyes, however, had the malice that he remembered seeing when she had returned from a battle that enticed her warlust. He did not know what the woman was thinking. Scathach, for her turn, looked at the downed kid and smirked at him. He would be the one, after all. She could already see it. This kid 5 or 10 years older will be a force of nature. At 12 years old, he was already able to project a noble phantasm. She had just decided, they had 2 months, right? Well, she would make sure to train him to the ground. Perhaps Shuru would be the one to finally give what she most desired in this world, someone to finally kill her after a glorious battle. Ah, Miss Scathach, why are you laughing like that? She turned to look at the boy and her bloodlust smile still present. Shuru, the tone in which she used to call his name made him tremble. I said it before that my training would hurt, but now I have changed my mind. The boy blinked, somehow not feeling that this was good news. It's going to be worse, much worse. He gulped at the woman as he got up from the ground, presumably already much better than before, which only made her giggle in excitement. I will teach you how to fight. Throughout these 2 months, you will train your projection and reinforcement until you fall on the ground. After that, I will teach you how to fight with a spear. I'm hoping to take your rapid healing to good use. Shuru looked pensive at that, but he knew that he needed this. He needed someone willing to train him, and he already felt worse pain in his life. Scathach showed a full bloody smile as she saw once more the resolve in his eyes, facing her head on. She respected that. Throwing Shuru's projected lance at the kid, he caught it and looked back at her. Now, I will be teaching you my style. So, get ready. She unleashed her own Gai Bolg and began the lesson. It has been a full 2 months since Shuru arrived in the Land of Shadows. And like his newly appointed teacher promised, his life became a living hell ever since the woman discovered his Magus skills, followed by high pain tolerance and even a somehow instant healing ability. Since he had projected a version of her accursed blood-red lance, the boy had practiced his projection and weapon reinforcement until he strained his magic circuits. The woman would make him not only project her spear, but also other weapons as well. She later found out that Shuru's ability worked better with weapons that he effectively laid his eyes on through structural grasp magecraft. She had a weapon storage in her castle with many different weapons, and Shuru had looked at them all and worked his projection. Of course, none of those were noble phantasms, so he did not strain his circuits projecting them. Swords, lances, daggers, knives, spears, among others. He had trained his ability to a point that his projections took less time and even less effort. Aside from his projection and weapon reinforcement, she had taught him how to reinforce his own body. In the end, though, Shuru realized that by learning this, he became even more of a punching bag to her whim than before. After the mystery training, it was time for her to teach him how to fight using a spear. At first, she had instructed him to mirror her movements. The boy's keen eyes had already grasped somewhat her style of fighting with his projection skills, so she realized it would only be a matter of time for him to at least move accordingly. The beating would come next, but she needed him to learn the needed stance and ways to use the spear in combat. It took him 2 weeks to memorize the movements to a degree that she found it acceptable. Once that happened, the beating started. His teacher would fight him using speed that he was not used to and slammed the other side of the spear in pretty much every part of his body below the neck. Using the accursed blade part of the spear would seriously harm him, and that was completely counterproductive. Aside from that, anything was valid. Even if the boy attempted to block or dodge, Scathach would follow with another strike, and that was simply impossible to avoid. One time Shuru was covered in enough bruises that he passed out from the pain. Still, despite the brutal method, he learned. Well, the more accurate description would be that his body was self-taught to avoid pain. He received enough beating that he stopped focusing on how to move the spear accordingly and simply moved it to parry the strikes. However, every time he adapted to her speed, she would double it. The hematomes had only increased in size and red hue. Also, with body reinforcement and his healing ability, it would take a serious beating to bring him down. And for Scathach, she enjoyed every minute of her version of training. Shuru had told her that he had always trained his body for hours in his house, and she found out that the boy had enough stamina to handle the physical training. Despite the constant beating, the boy rarely complained. And the hours of training would help his body take on the strain of high-level fighting as he grew up. That was enough incentive for her to keep things up a notch every time, until even she thought she exaggerated it. She could not help but respect the kid's resolve as he devoted everything to her training. By the end of the 2 months, Scathach could safely say that he could keep up with 10% of her overall strength. Problem now was training his offensive capabilities. Obviously, she would not be idle as he attacked her, quickly shifting from defense to offensive so as to teach him about being one step ahead of the opponent. By the end of the 2 months, Shuru's offensive skills did not match his defense, though Scathach at least had to confess that she may not be the best opponent for him to test his skills against. Aside from training and on the days that Shuru was not too exhausted or passed out, the boy would keep his promise and become her personal chef. Also, Scathach had heard from the boy about his conversations with his father about being a hero of justice and how he strove to save everyone from harm one day. Seriously, by this point, the beautiful warrior goddess wanted to personally pound this Emiya Kuritsugu to the ground for the bad influence on his son. It's not that she was against the prospect of fighting to protect others. Her other students had thrown themselves into impossible odds to protect those they cherished. However, the way Shuru phrased his dreams sent her all possible negative signs. The point of saving everyone without, let's say, a screening process of character was literally an impossible goal. "You're wrong," Shuru had screamed at her when she voiced her opinion about his stupid dream. And she rubbed her forehead upon such childish behavior. "Look, kid, I won't say how you are to live your life. After you leave here, you could do whatever the hell you want, but if you want my opinion, that ideal is more like a curse than a noble gesture." Protecting those in need is noble, but protecting everyone is foolish. Hell, your father did say that when you save someone means you can't save another. At least, he had the common sense to say that. What would you do if you see a woman being raped and the only means of stopping it is to kill the rapist? Shuru was still furious and was acting childishly stubborn, but she could see that he really had no answer to her question. Saving everyone would mean that Shuru would have to protect not only the victims, but also the criminals as well. Fighting to protect victims is a noble goal, Shuru, but if you choose to protect the criminal, in essence, you would be helping the criminal commit the crime. The boy had turned his back to her after that specific conversation and went back to his couch in deep ponder. He stayed there for 2 whole days, pondering about his teacher's words in his solitude. Shuru's dream to become a hero of justice was more like replicating the memory of how happy Kuritsugu became upon saving him that day from the fire. The man's tears of joy blinded Shuru at the time. It was like Kuritsugu's existence and his purpose in life were validated the moment that he had rescued Shuru from the fire. Said purpose was beautiful in Shuru's mind. It was something to strive for and certainly most would believe it to be a worthy dream. However, what if the person was a criminal, a murderer, someone who relished in hurting others? Worst yet if, in Skathich's words, Shuru helped save a criminal, only for the criminal to keep on harming others. That in itself defied every possible logic in his young mind. The only example he had was of Kuritsugu saving a child. Would his father bother to save a murderer? A rapist? No, certainly his father would not, and Shuru found out that he could not as well. Just thinking about choosing to protect a criminal made him cringe at the possible look of betrayal from the victim. Being a hero meant above all to protect those who are in need. As he stared at the fireplace, the boy let his mind wander. Was his ideal wrong? Was Kuritsugu deceiving him once more like he did with Shuru's magecraft training? Despite how Kuritsugu obstructed his training, Shuru could not find that his ideal was wrong nor that Kuritsugu deceived him that much. As he looked outside, Shuru frowned as he got used to seeing darkness. The boy missed seeing the sun. He missed feeling the warm wind. He missed his home. Fighting to protect others was a noble goal to have, but above all, he would strive to protect those that needed his help. However, what if he ends up saving someone who willingly wronged others? He could not have that, and that now penetrated the bubble that was his ideal. When you choose to save someone, it means you choose not to save another. If that was true, then Shuru needed to make judgment calls, or rather judgment of character. He sighed in resignation at the notion, however he realized that it was a more trimmed approach to a blind ideal. He was still blind, however, as to how exactly to behave from here on out, but he still wished to protect those in need of his help. _= at the kitchen == Skathich was in the kitchen relaxing with a glass of whiskey as she waited for Shuru to appear. Ever since that talk, the woman could see how deeply he considered the ideal. And frankly, as she decided to tutor him, she in the end had taken on the responsibility to tutor him in more ways than merely overcome his previous magecraft shortcomings. In many ways, Shuru was the ideal student. He rarely complained, he had the resolve to learn, he had focus, and said focus was deeply linked to his ideal of being something else in the future. Being someone who will protect others. And she respected that and even admired his tenacity. But she found that she could not allow him to go on like this. Swirling her glass, the woman smiled as she heard the boy's steps echoing in the hall. When he stepped foot inside the kitchen, she could see his eyes still in deep thought. That alone made her at ease, as the boy was not that stubborn and was open for different points of view. Obviously, she did not believe that he would simply change his mind just like that. He would adhere to her words in the end, of that she was sure. He alone could decide how he would live his life, but as he grew up, his ideals needed to be better molded to become something he could live by. Something with stronger foundations, so that it will not crumble easily. But he had time for that. Feeling better, Shuru. The boy looked at the woman and nodded with a content smile. Yeah, sorry for yelling the other day, Miss Skathich. You only wanted to help after all. She nodded with a smile as well. Such a fine student, indeed. You don't need to worry, kid, striving to fight for others is indeed noble, but I think I understand what you're saying, Miss Skathich, though I'm still thinking about it. She nodded as she got up and caressed his head in a caring manner. That is all I ask Shuru, not everything is set in stone. For an ideal to become a reality you have to be 100% sure in your resolve to see it through. There will be times in your life when you will have doubts, that is only natural. I am sure, though, that you will reach where you want to be. You are my student after all and quite the stubborn one. Shuru blushed at the praise. Over time, he learned to respect her as his teacher, aside from their ruthless training that is. Now, it's been some time since I last ate one of your meals, Shuru laughed as he grabbed the ingredients and moved towards the stove. == 1 week later ===. The time eventually came when the portal back to Fuyuki opened once more. Scathach had been monitoring it every day. She had placed some of her ruins to strengthen it to the point that she could open it and close it anytime she wished. She had a responsibility to this place, and she could not allow for another to simply appear without her noticing. It was now time for her new student to return back home. Even if she had grown accustomed to his presence, his place was not here in the land of shadows. Shuru, upon receiving the news, was slightly torn between elation at the prospect of returning home and leaving his teacher. It may have been only 2 months since he arrived here, but during this time, she had helped him in many ways with his magecraft deficiencies. So much so, that Shuru had received the go-ahead from the woman that he could learn other skills aside from those he practiced, with the only limitation being elemental magecraft. Because their time was short, Scathach had given him a book about runecraft, her specialty. The only problem was that it was written in Irish, so the boy needed a dictionary. Right now, Shuru was with Scathach just behind the portal that would take him back to Ryudo Temple's forest. He could see his teacher's runes keeping the portal opened. She explained to him that she was now in control of it, which meant in his head that perhaps he could come back for more teaching. However, the woman explained that only she could cross. Once he crossed, then Scathach would close the portal. He felt that he would miss her, a brutal in training she may be, but there was no better teacher in his mind. Scathach looked at him and found he was hesitating. What are you waiting for, Shuru? She could see a saddened look on his face. Will I ever see you again, Miss Scathach? ... For you to come here again would mean that you are dead. Shuru flinched at the response, but then remembered the place's inhabitants. Shuru, the kid lifted his head to look at her and was surprised to see a deep smile directed at him. Even if for a brief period, I am proud to have the opportunity to tutor a fine warrior such as yourself. I only ask that you do not slack in your training and do me proud. A lone tear escaped his eyes as he surprised her by hugging her stomach. More surprised was she upon herself returning the hug. She ended up growing attached to him. Now, get going, he looked up once more and nodded in appreciation for everything. The boy then passed through the gate, but not before looking back and seeing her nodding at him. Once he stepped outside, he frowned at still seeing darkness, but then realized that he was still inside the cave. Walking a bit more, his eyes were immediately assaulted by the bright sunlight. It almost blinded him, but he could at least tell that it was probably midday by now. The heat on his now deep white skin was burning him. He had been 2 months without sunlight after all. Shuru crossed the forest through the shadows of the trees as he walked until he managed to reach the stairs of the temple. After reaching it, he thought about what to do. Certainly, he had no money with him right now to take a bus, so he had to walk. Also, Shuru was sure that Taiga or even his father will bombard him with questions, demanding to find out where he was this whole time. Shuru wondered if perhaps they notified the police of his disappearance. What exactly would he tell them? That he somehow crossed to another dimension to the land of the dead and has been training there. Certainly, no one would believe him. A better, or rather the only one he could think of, excuse appeared in his mind. He could explain exactly what happened until the point that he crossed. That he went inside the forest hoping to get a ball for the kid and then went deep inside some cave. Once inside, he must have fallen and hit his head, since that would be the last thing he remembered. It was quite lame, but he really did not have one better. It took the kid the better part of 2 hours until he managed to reach the street of his house. Like he expected, there was a police car in front of his house. Close to the car, there were 2 police officers and Taiga crying her eyes out, probably at their report that no one was able to find his whereabouts. Just seeing the woman's state made Shuru's chest ache. Even if unintentionally, he was the cause of such pain. When Taiga saw little Shuru walking towards the house, she ran with all her might and reached him in seconds, holding him and crying. "Oh Shuru-kun, I'm glad you are alive, I've been so worried, you don't appear hurt, where were you? Why did you do this to me?" The woman was panicking as the police reported to the station that he was found. Sorry, he gave her and the police the half version of what happened, at least until he entered the cave and must have hit his head or something, since he did not remember anything afterward. His body was still showing signs from Scathach's bruises, so it was more or less plausible. Also, given his age, there was no need for the police to interrogate the boy. Their objective was to find him, and now that he showed up, there was no need for the police to be there. Taiga then ushered him back home, holding him as if he would get away once more from her grasp. Shuru noticed in sadness that the house was empty, so it meant that his father was still traveling. Taiga had demanded him to get some rest and he obliged it. He knew that she would not listen if he tried saying that he was fine. "You get some rest Shuru-kun, and I will bring you something to eat, poor boy." The boy acquiesced and lied down as the woman left towards the kitchen. He hid the book on runes from his teacher inside his desk, as it would no doubt warrant questions. Not from Taiga, but his father would recognize it instantly. Also, he doubted the man would not ask questions, but Shuru would at least have time before he arrived, as no doubt Taiga would inform him of what happened the minute he came back from his trip. == 1 month later == Emiya Kuritsugu had returned from his trip from Germany, and Shuru could certainly state that his father looked even paler than the time he left. He was coughing repeatedly and could barely walk before finally resting on his cushion at the dinner table. He had insisted he was fine, however, but Shuru could certainly see that he was far from fine. Taiga was torn between taking care of Kuritsugu and troubling him with what happened to Shuru. From the looks of it, the man was about to faint right there. The man's eyes looked empty and dull as he heard from Taiga what happened to Shuru and even Shuru's lame explanation. Shuru, however, realized that something was very wrong with his father. In that second, Emiya Kuritsugu coughed hard and a smear of blood splattered on their table. The man tried holding more blood from pouring from his mouth with his hand, but more came out, and then it came from his nose as well. His eyes failed to respond, and he passed out right there in front of his family, smashing his forehead on his pool of blood. Taiga and Shuru cried frantically for him, and Shuru called for the emergency. However, by the time they arrived, there was nothing else anyone could do. His funeral was held the next day. It was not overly crowded, just their neighbors, the Fujimura, Issei and Issei's father attended. == The Land of Shadows == When Emiya Kuritsugu next opened his eyes, he found himself lost. The man had no misconceptions of what heaven looked like, or even hell for that matter, though he had very little doubt that he would go to the latter. Kuritsugu firmly believed in justice, but the means to reach that were not necessarily noble. His underhanded tactics in life brought much the ire of many, to the point that he wondered if perhaps he would meet those he killed in the afterlife to settle the score. However, this land he was in right now was quite ominous. His eyes could see specters and rats hanging freely in a clearing, and the man could see a castle in the horizon. Looking down at his body, Kuritsugu could see a dark aura, enveloping him whole. He had his usual clothes, a black overcoat, a plain shirt and a loose tie. Kuritsugu's spirit then flinched as the rats all charged at him, and the man cursed. He fought them with his bare hands, greatly missing his guns. They were his mystic codes in life. Without that, he was limited to his own magic capabilities and used his time alter spells, dealing with the wraiths. Though he was severely outnumbered, and they ganged up on him, until the man saw a red spear skewer them all. When Kuritsugu next got up, he saw the image of his savior. A gorgeous woman by the looks of things, though her presence in this place surprised the elder Emiya. She was no wraith or spirit. He flinched upon feeling the spear she had suddenly inches from his jugular. He could feel the immense power and curse of the spear, and he was familiar with curses. Scathach looked at the blackened spirit in front of her with a frown. Rarely did she ever encounter one with that much dark aura around him. Still, she had observed his battle from afar, before interfering. "Were you a magus? Who are you?" Kuritsugu looked at the woman holding the spear at his neck and briefly wondered what she could do with him. He was already dead. Still, he had next to no knowledge about what would, could, or should happen to him now. He still had his consciousness and his troubled memories. He still had his magic skills intact and he could feel his magic circuits, even. That said, though, he is in this strange dark land filled with ghosts and wraiths. If this land is his next destination, then for sure he is not in heaven right now. I am Emiya Kuritsugu and yes I was a magus. Kuritsugu was surprised to see the look of surprise and recognition in the woman's normally indifferent eyes. Though, he was baffled as he never met her before in his life. Well, that's a surprise, the kid did say that you were close to death, kid. If you're here, then Emiya Kuritsugu, then it means that you are not able to ascend due to whatever unfinished business you had in life. Considering what Shuru told her about him, she was not surprised. Though, seeing the man in front of him, Scathach could practically feel the level of curse he was inflicted with. I'm sorry to say this, but this land will be your home from now on, until you can rid your spirit from the heavy toll. You will have to fend for yourself against the others here. So, unless you want to become food for the other wraiths, I suggest you watch your back from now on. Kuritsugu heard the explanation. Oh, he had unfinished business all right, many. He sighed as he now realized his destiny after everything he has done. Still, he had no expectations about being somehow rewarded for his actions. He had enough blood on his hands and he had failed many of his loved ones, his father. Shirley, Natalia, Irisvil, Ilyasvil, Shuru. He even found remorse in his actions towards the King of Knights, when she was his servant in the war. One thing did bother the man though as he looked at the woman with the red spear. He saw his son Shuru just moments before his dire illness sent him to death. And if this woman lived here, strange as that sounds, then there was only one other kid who knew him and could be here. Wait, you mentioned about a kid, did you meet my daughter? Is she dead? Despite the circumstances, Scathach smiled. It seemed that Shuru did not tell the man about his little escapade. Though the boy never mentioned having a sister. I see no reason not to indulge you Emiya Kuritsugu, it's best that you can overcome your unfinished business, so you won't turn into one of them for eternity. Kuritsugu saw the woman pointing to the wraiths. I do not know of your daughter, but I know of your son, Emiya Shuru. Scathach told the man everything that transpired. From Shuru finding the gateway to this place from a cave nearby a place called Ryudo Temple in Fuyuki, Japan to her training him throughout this time, until she was able to take him back. Kuritsugu heard it all quite baffled at his son's actions. He found it quite humorous the kid's attempt of an explanation as to why he was gone for 2 months, but Kuritsugu's disease pretty much obscured any rational thinking. To believe that his son not only came to this land, but also got to train under this lady was mind-blowing. Then, again, that kid always managed to surprise him. I see, so Shuru managed that much in bare 2 months. Scathach rarely found herself feeling anger. Normally, she would only use emotions that would better aid her in a fight. But, right now, seeing the man who had placed such a burden on his son, her student, made her quite angry. No thanks to you. Kuritsugu looked up at the woman, who was crossing her arms and looking bloody murder at him, though he wondered what he could possibly done to earn such ire from a person he had just met. During his time with me, Shuru told me about you Emiya Kuritsugu. How you introduced him to the world of magic but failed to instruct him properly. You left him alone to his own devices and the kid ended up self-taught. Did you know he was using his nerves to make magic circuits? The man flinched at the absurd notion. Though he remembered how his son suffered to make even the simplest of spells. It was through sheer luck that the boy did not kill himself doing this a long time ago. Kuritsugu snorted at that. No matter what happened, Avalon would not allow anything to happen to him. Still, the man realized how much of a bad parent he was at not realizing what his son was doing. It was tough to realize that even after death, he could add another item to his list of regrets. I was not aware that he was hurting himself like this. Guess it's one more item to add to the list of regrets towards Shuru, and to believe that he was my redemption. Scathach could see the glow in the man's eyes, or rather lack thereof. This man was dead even before losing his life. It was a rare sight. The woman had met hundreds, thousands, even millions of souls that passed through these lands and not once did she see such apathy. Though considering the blackened aura around him it was to be expected. I can see you have many regrets in your life, Emiya Kuritsugu, so I won't bother telling about your other mistake towards Shuru. I didn't want him to become a magus. Kuritsugu did not even hear what the woman had said, earning a surprised look from her, considering that Kuritsugu had shouted. I did not want that life for him. He was supposed to live a good regular life, finish school, go to college, marry, have a nice family. I did not want him to have the life of a magus. But he kept insisting. Kuritsugu was showing anger like he never showed before, but he stopped once he remembered the times with his son. Shuru showed his stubbornness early in his life. He never gave up, he never complained about anything. He took care of me, more than I took care of him, and I am the father. Even when I introduced to magic, I still did not want him to pursue this life, but I should have realized that he would not leave this alone. Scathach could see tears falling freely now. Not that I do not agree with your intention, because I don't particularly care about your kind, but why did you not want him to pursue the life of a magus? The elder Emiya released a sigh in sadness and he looked at the woman. Fuyuki is the land where the Greater Grail is situated. Scathach widened her eyes at that. Of course, she was privy to the Grail Wars. I was the master of the last Grail War that happened 10 years ago, and I feared that if Shuru became a magus, then he would be possibly dragged to the next one. However, I came to know that the Grail is corrupted, and I ordered my servant to destroy it. In doing so, I was cursed with a powerful disease that cost me my life. Now, since you opened his circuits and properly taught him, no doubt he will become strong, perhaps strong enough to be chosen as a master of the Fifth Grail War. The boy is stubborn that way. He won't stop training to improve, he has a drive after all. Scathach snorted loudly. To become a hero of justice, right? Kuritsugu looked on in surprise, but then smiled. So, he told you that, huh? I don't see why you're smiling, fool. That was perhaps even worse than not helping him with his magic circuits. To his surprised look, the woman elaborated, retelling the enlightening conversation she had with the kid. Kuritsugu heard it all, however, this time at least he found no regret in his actions. A man's ideal may be initially shaped after an example, a role model. However, like the woman explained it to his son, it needed molding through time and experience. He was at least grateful for her to take such an interest in his son. Though, now, Kuritsugu became troubled at the prospect of his son becoming a master in the next war. He did not know how many years would take for the Fifth War to occur. One thing he knew for sure was that his son now needed all the help he could get in order to be better prepared for when the time came. I'm sorry, but we have been talking for too long and I don't even know your name. My name is Scathach, gatekeeper of the Land of the Shadows. Kuritsugu's eyes widened at that. He literally had nothing in his mind right now. Emiya Kuritsugu was privy to many legends in the world. As such, he knew of hers. And if Shuru got trained by such a fighter, then at least Kuritsugu can rest easily, knowing that his son would be left in good hands. I see that you took great interest in training him, and I fear that my son will need all the help he could get in getting stronger for when the next war begins. Can you help him? Truth be told, Scathach still believed that Shuru would be the one to finally kill her. He had the potential for it. However, for that to happen, she would have to tutor him all the way. She could not do that in here. He did not belong to this place. And part of the reason that she controlled the portal to Fuyuki was to eventually see about the kid's training, though she would have to search the kid first. However, the request came as a surprise. Even if Shuru has great potential and makes me want to help him reach that potential, what makes you think I can leave this place? Kuritsugu only smirked at that. Are you saying you can't? Scathach did not bother to give a response, opting best to ponder. Whether or not she would leave this place to help Shuru, she did not find the need to make this man any favors. Well, Emiya Kuritsugu, I no longer see any reason to extend this conversation with you. The man frowned in worry, though he could not force her to do anything. A piece of advice, though, watch your back in here and take advantage of your solitude to get past your traumas. Otherwise, you will be trapped here forever. She then turned his back to Kuritsugu, who was then left alone to ponder on his life. The woman said it like it was possible. Going through his traumas would require a great deal of time and effort. Kuritsugu's entire life was full of regrets, ever since he killed his own father when he was a kid. As to Shuru, the man now could only hope that the boy would make the right choices in the end. That was all he could ever hope for in the end. And if Shuru somehow became a master, then Kuritsugu was almost certain that having Avalon would allow him to summon the King of Knights once more. In Kuritsugu's mind, Arturia Pendragon would protect him just like she protected Irisville. With Scathach . It has been 2 days since the woman had the conversation with Kuritsugu as she now appeared at the gateway towards Fuyuki. She no longer remembered the last time she saw sunlight. Probably centuries passed when she was but a regular fighter. Strengthening the runes that held the gate open, she went through it and immediately felt the foreign wind reaching her face. Of course, she could not afford to leave the place for long. It would be required to return every now and then. Unlike Shuru, though, when she stepped foot outside, it was already nighttime, which helped her a great deal. The sky was filled with bright stars and she marveled at the moon. Her hands gently caressed the forest fauna around her as many different smells invaded her nostrils. Taking in a deep breath, the spear user smiled at the feeling. She had approached Kuritsugu's wraith the day before, asking him for general directions to their house. The man did show her some semblance of gratitude for helping his son, but she made it clear that she was doing it for Shuru, not because of his request. Truth be told, she missed being around him. She missed their training sessions and she missed his cooking. Above all else, she missed the kid. There was a sense of peace and calm being around him. And now that she knew that he would face servants in the future, she needed to double his training. Not that she believed that Shuru would be able to face one in battle, as even she had doubts about her having enough strength to face a servant. However, Shuru would be able to at least be better prepared. Even so, as the woman was unfamiliar in this land, it would be not an easy task to navigate. Also, seeing as she was wearing her battle suit and had her lance strapped on her back, it would be ill-advised to stand out. With that, she took her path to the shadows, using her agility to move between buildings. That's it for part 1 of Naruto and the Forbidden Shadow Spear. If you enjoyed this darker Naruto storyline, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more epic Naruto What If fanfics. Comment below, should Naruto master the Shadow Spear, or should its power slowly corrupt him? See you in part 2.